Well, the bipartisan infrastructure deal that was announced yesterday left out some key climate initiatives that were included in the president's initial proposal. Among them, the establishment of a national clean energy standard. Our next guest has introduced legislation to increase solar energy manufacturing in the U.S. through tax credits. Let's bring in Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff from Georgia. Great to have you on today, Senator. We're going to get to that bill in just a bit, but given the headlines that have come out of Washington over the last 24 hours, I'd love to just get your take on what has emerged here. We're talking essentially a $1.2 trillion deal that is now on the table. Is that something that you would support without the budget reconciliation bill, or do they have to move in tandem to get your support?
Look, first, I want to congratulate the Senate negotiators and the White House on the progress that they've made achieving a bipartisan agreement and the kind of historic investment that we need to see in transit, in transportation, in clean energy, in accelerating the transition from fossil fuel combustion to renewables is going to require historic investment. This bipartisan deal is one component of what's going to need to be a broader and more ambitious effort to accelerate the transition to clean energy and to make long deferred investments in the construction and maintenance of U.S. infrastructure. The civil engineers, for example, estimate that we are $2.6 trillion behind the curve on construction and maintenance of U.S. infrastructure. And we have the opportunity now to govern, to assert American vision and American strength, to make up for lost time. We've been kicking the can on this for too long. So it needs to be an ambitious plan for infrastructure and clean energy. And this bipartisan aspect is one component of that plan.
As it relates to clean energy, when you look at things that are not included in this particular bill, how do you prioritize the initiatives that you'd like to see in the budget reconciliation bill? Would it be about tax incentives to speed up electrification, make homes more efficient? I mean, there's a long list of things that were included in the president's proposal that were omitted from this bipartisan deal.
Well, Akiko, the good news is that the steps that we need to take are not mysterious. As you pointed out, energy efficiency is a key component. Electrification at the enterprise level and the household level is a key component. A rapid transition to electric vehicle adoption and production is a key component. And on that note, Georgia hosts the SK Innovation electric vehicle battery plant, the largest foreign direct investment in Georgia's history, which was threatened by a trade dispute that I was able to work with President Biden to resolve so that American auto manufacturers will have a diversified supply of the heavy lithium-ion batteries necessary to produce electric vehicles. And we need to invest in scaling rapidly domestic production of clean energy technology. That's why I introduced legislation this week to establish a manufacturing tax credit at all stages of the solar supply chain that will help us onshore the solar supply chain, which is currently dominated by China. China, for the last 15 years, has been heavily subsidizing solar technological development and production with little in the way of a robust response from the United States. It is an environmental imperative, an economic imperative, and a national security imperative that we be energy independent and that the United States have the capacity to produce all of the technology necessary to accelerate this transition to clean energy.
Yeah, it's interesting to see kind of that push. I mean, obviously, you there in Georgia have a couple plants of note, including the largest solar panel manufacturing site in the Western Hemisphere, and it's a big push. Voters there, too, in Georgia seem to be catching up in terms of the amount of people that believe climate change is happening and then also that are worried about it, similar to the national polling averages as well. I mean, how important, though, is it to invest now to catch up to China, and how quickly do you think it can happen if this bill is passed to really put us on equal grounds to compete on price?
It's essential because we have been, just as we've deferred investment in the construction and maintenance of infrastructure, we have for too long deferred the kind of definitive investment that we need in American manufacturing of clean energy technology. And that's why this is a refundable tax credit. This is going to allow companies to front load capital expenditures, to rapidly scale production, get those lines working so that American products are flowing not just to all the applications of the United States, but also to the massively growing export markets. This transition to clean energy is happening. It's necessary. The science is definitive. And with this transition, Demand for products like solar panels and solar modules is going to continue to grow exponentially. The United States needs to be a key player in the production of this technology. We can't allow China to monopolize this market. And this solar manufacturing tax credit is a key part of that initiative. You mentioned Georgia. Little known fact, the state of Georgia hosts the largest solar module manufacturing facility in the Western Hemisphere. And when I ran for the Senate, I said I want to make Georgia the national leader in clean energy production and technology, and the United States the world leader in clean energy. The legislation that I introduced is intended to do just that. It is estimated it will create tens of thousands of jobs in the solar sector across the United States.
Senator, when you look at the numbers in the supply chain here, when we're talking about solar, it does point to a huge hurdle that you could face in trying to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. About 80% of components, when you talk about the global picture here, is in China. How much of that market share you think you can get back through these tax credits, through these incentives? And what kind of timeline are you looking at?
The United States can regain significant market share over the next 4 to 8 years. We cannot allow this supply chain to be so dominated by a single source, especially when energy production is not just an economic and environmental imperative, it's a national security issue. We used to talk all the time about energy independence in the fossil fuel context. We also need to be thinking about energy independence in the renewables context. And I worked with the White House and the Department of Energy and leaders in the industry to value this tax credit such that on a price per unit basis at every stage of the solar supply chain, from polysilicon to ingots to wafers to modules, the United States will be competitive or at an advantage on a price per unit basis against Chinese manufacturers and other foreign competitors.
What kind of support do you have? How confident are you that this can pass? And is there a potential opportunity here to gain momentum on this bill now that we've got what was a big climate-focused infrastructure bill sort of broken down into pieces now?
There's a lot of momentum. And my objective is to work closely with Senator Ron Wyden, who chairs the Finance Committee, to fold this solar manufacturing tax credit into the overall infrastructure and clean energy proposal. I am actively seeking Republican colleagues who would also support this proposal. I have Republican colleagues with significant solar manufacturing facilities or planned investments in their states. And this is really not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. This is about American leadership, American competitiveness, and the United States is poised. We have the technology, we have the workforce, we have the deep capital markets, we have the market economy such that we can rapidly scale our production of solar technology and other renewables. If we have the incentives aligned properly, we take it seriously and we unite to get it done.
And how many jobs do you think you can create through this? I mean, you've really pitched this as part of a job creation bill. What kind of number are you looking at?
Well, working with industry experts in the Department of Energy, my assessment is that we can create between 20 and 60,000 jobs in solar manufacturing alone over the next 10 years. And then there's a knock-on effect, which is all the installation, the racks, all of the adjacent economic activity that will blossom as more and more of this technology is installed. So it's a major job creation opportunity for the United States. And I want to emphasize again, Georgia is the national leader in the production of solar modules. Georgia is the hemispheric leader in the production of solar modules. That facility in Dalton, Georgia, again, the largest solar module plant in the Western Hemisphere. This is a huge economic opportunity for my state.
Senator, just lastly, I mean, just to follow on Georgia, it's also become the epicenter of what has become a rather important issue for Americans. That would be the issue of voting rights. And now we're seeing the DOJ coming out and suing Georgia over some of those restrictions. I mean, you had a front row seat for some of this playing out. Obviously, there are a lot of people out there who would say the defense of voting rights in Georgia enabled you to win out there. It seems like an important issue, but we saw earlier this week the For the People Act failing to move forward. And you have Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell talking about how this is, as he calls it, one of the biggest lies in politics, that states are working to suppress the vote. I mean, why is he wrong? And why do you need more protections for voters out there? What's the biggest issue you're seeing right now?
Well, look, first of all, this is a story as old as the South. And one of the most threatening aspects of this current voter suppression push is that it's not limited to the South. It's a national effort by Republican-dominated state legislatures to nudge election law in a direction that gives them a partisan advantage. That's why Republican state legislators in Georgia slashed opportunities for early voting and runoff elections. It's why they've made it so much more arduous for seniors, for example, to participate in voting by mail, despite not a shred of evidence that there was abuse of voting by mail. It's why they've given partisan state officials the authority to take over local election boards. Think about how dangerous that is. We just had a situation where the former president of the United States was threatening Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, threatening criminal prosecution if he didn't break the law to, quote, find the votes. That was President Trump's quote, to push Trump over the top in Georgia, despite the fact that he lost. So it is very, very dangerous that state legislatures are passing these bills based on lies about election fraud with clear partisan intent. Under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, the U.S. Congress has the authority to regulate how federal elections are held, and we must pass voting rights legislation to secure the franchise for every American citizen.
Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, appreciate you taking the time here to chat with us today. We'll see how the progress goes on all those initiatives. Hope to have you back on soon. Be well.